So, The Amazing Spider-Man was directed by Mark Webb and it starred Andrew Garfield, Emma Stone, Rhys Ifans, Martin Sheen, and Sally Field. And in this movie, it's about Peter Parker. He is a kid who is not really that popular. He's not really that muscular. He's not really good at anything. And then one day he gets bitten by a spider in a lab, and then he decides to use those powers that he gets from the bite to become this vigilante known as Spider-Man. In this never before told story before of this version of Spider-Man, only it's pretty much the exact same thing as the first movie. So I remember when this movie was coming out, I remember kind of being a little bitter about it because I remember loving Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie. I even enjoyed Spider-Man 3 at that point, and if you saw my review, said it's okay. And I was very mad when they said, we're going to scrap the entire Sam Raimi franchise and we're just going to reboot the entire franchise as it is and just do this new version of Spider-Man. And I was very mad at the time because I really wanted to see what Sam Raimi would have done for a fourth Spider-Man movie. But I remember thinking that it's like, okay, this is kind of cool. You have Andrew Garfield coming off of Social Network as Spider-Man. Okay, cool. You also have Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy. That sounds pretty cool too. And the movie itself, um, it's not. It's not very amazing. It's not very cool. It's just kind of a dull, drab movie that just so happens to have the Spider-Man name attached to it. Having rewatched it again for the first time, probably in a few years, I don't like this movie. I just don't care. It's not a bad movie by any means. It's not as bad as The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is. We'll talk about that. But I just feel like it's a movie that is just not even going through the motions and just trying to assemble things in a way that's just not coherent. But let's talk about some things in the movie that I think are okay. Andrew Garfield, once he becomes Spider-Man, he's cool. I kind of like his persona as Spider-Man. I think the difference between Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man and Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, whereas like Tobey Maguire, I think he was a better Peter Parker than he was as Spider-Man. Where I feel like Andrew Garfield is a better Spider-Man than he is as Peter Parker. Peter Parker's kind of a bland character in this movie, if I'm being honest. I don't really know what he's going through in this movie. Every performance, every moment of this movie from him is just kind of like he's just confused and just out of his mind. And it's like, I don't get it. There's no bad performances in this movie by any means. Like Martin Sheen has a few good moments. Rhys Ifans has a few good moments. Even Irfan Khan, who's not in the movie that much. Emma Stone is okay. Denis Leary is probably the other actor in this movie that I think is actually really good in this movie as Captain Stacy. Definitely a better version of Captain Stacy than the version we got in the Sam Raimi movies. And there's actually kind of an arc there about him and Spider-Man and such, like how he doesn't like Spider-Man and how they team up at the end. Okay, that's fine, I guess. That's actually kind of cool. There are some fun scenes in the movie, like the first big fight of the movie between Spider-Man and Lizard. Not counting the one in the sewers, but I mean the one in the school, which is like, it's very chaotic, it's very fun, there's a lot of energy to it, and there's also a fun Stan Lee cameo. Why does Stan Lee get the fun cameos in the bad MCU movies? Well, not MCU movies, but like the Marvel movies in general. So used to MCU movies, I consider every movie an MCU movie. There are also some cool shots in this movie too, where there's like one with Dr. Connors, and in this movie he only has the one arm, and he's kind of like standing at a mirror, and he's like kind of holding his one arm that works, and you kind of see the Phantom arm, and he's kind of like raising it both. It's like that's actually a really cool shot there, and actually kind of shows what he wants from this movie because the movie doesn't really do anything else with it. Pretty much everything else about this movie I don't like. I don't like this version of Peter Parker, honestly. I don't find him interesting. I kind of find him to be more douchey in this movie than anything else. He's kind of like what I said about in Spider-Man 3 with Peter in that movie. When he becomes a symbiote, when he gets a symbiote in him, when he's acting like, a jerk, it's actually interesting, but when he's acting like a douche, it's not. And I think he's acting more like a douchebag in this movie, if I'm being honest. Like, he taunts Flash throughout this entire movie. He's supposed to be riding his skateboard, which it's kind of dumb. Like, he has that skateboard with him throughout it. There's even the scene where he gets bitten by the spider and leaves Oscorp, and he has a skateboard with him, even though it was not in the previous shots at all. It makes no sense. I didn't find his character that interesting. I found his to be really reckless with, like, everything in this movie. You could argue he's a teen and he's kind of supposed to be reckless, but no, I found his character to be too reckless. Like, so at first, like, when he has some of these powers and he's, like, kind of confused, like, what's going on and such, like, okay, he bashes his clock, he slams the door and the glass breaks. That's all fine. But, like, after he becomes Spider-Man, like, there's a scene where he's kissing not Mary Jane. I'm still stuck on the Sam Raimi movies. Well, so then again, so is this one. We'll talk about that. He's kissing Gwen in this movie, and the football winds up getting thrown to him, but he throws it and it hits the goalpost. This is after he becomes Spider-Man. That always annoyed me. That always annoyed me in this movie. I don't know why. It just... Ugh. Meanwhile, I thought the movie was just too dark. And I'm not talking about, like, the tone of the movie. No, literally, it looks too dark. It's hard to tell what's even happening. And also, it just... Everything is supposed to be darker in this movie. I think they took cues from Batman Begins, because obviously that was a darker take on the Batman character, but Batman has already been kind of a dark character. Spider-Man is not a dark character by any means, and everything about it just feels depressing, and it's just not as fun as it should be. At least the first 3 movies were fun. They had adult and dark moments, but they worked in the movie overall. This movie is just dark for an unnecessary sake. I also don't like the visuals in this movie. Peter's suit. I don't like the way Peter's suit looks. It looks very cheap. It looks very childlike. I would say it looks like it came from a video game, but some of the Spider-Man movies... not some of the Spider-Man movies. The Spider-Man video games look better than this movie. And it's like, well, he's a kid. He's not really rich. Okay, but how can he make all these web shooters then? It's not the worst looking thing in this movie. Let's talk about the Lizard. The worst looking thing in this movie. The Lizard looks like he just came from the Super Mario world. Like, it just looks embarrassing. It looks silly to me. It's like, imagine if Batman Begins had Mr. Freeze from Batman and Robin just running around. That's how I feel like this movie is like. Because it wants to be taken seriously, and yet it looks silly. To me, it's only really silly when they don't understand how silly it is. And I feel like that's this movie. But let's talk about Curt Connors overall, because I felt like his character was just very underdeveloped. I was always kind of interested to see Dylan Baker as, Curt Connors and eventually Lizard. And it seemed like the movie was eventually going to make him the Lizard at some point. But this version of the Lizard, I don't find his character interesting at all. Like, there was a deleted scene where it's like he had a son, but he didn't want his son to know that he was missing an arm and such. That's some development, but they cut it for time. You cut that for time? That makes no sense. And his plan is so stupid. He turns into a lizard because of the serum that he takes. It's like, okay, first it grows a new arm for him. Cool. But then it turns green, and so now he's just this big, giant lizard. And so he decides he's going to turn every person in New York City into lizards. That is stupid. That is really stupid. Also, there's so many things in this movie that just don't make sense overall. Like, okay, at one point, Uncle Ben tells Peter, hey, you need to go pick up your aunt from work tonight. Okay, fine. And then Peter just kind of goofs off, does his own thing, and forgets about Aunt May. So when he comes home that night, Uncle Ben's like, did you forget something? Did you forget your aunt? You were supposed to pick her up. You should be ashamed of yourself. And all I'm thinking during the scene is, what was Peter supposed to pick her up with? A skateboard? Can you imagine just Aunt May riding a skateboard? That would be really funny. But no, it's just really random and it doesn't really make sense. It's all... The issues that I have with this movie, too, is that it follows the original movie verbatim, but it doesn't understand how those characters came about. Like, okay, so in the first Spider-Man movie, when Uncle Ben is like, with great power comes great responsibility and such, and Peter kind of brushes it off, and so when he does die, it does actually make sense where he's like, he eventually learns that lesson. But I felt like Peter never learns that lesson when that same lesson is given to him in this movie. Yeah, a lot of things are just repeated in this movie. Like, obviously the whole Uncle Ben storyline is repeated. But at the same time, there's that moment where he's like, it's very clunky. I don't even remember how he said it, but like, it was basically a longer version of, with great power comes great responsibility. It was like, not choice, responsibility, whatever that line is. It was so stupid. I hated that line. I mean, it's not as dumb as Madame Web's dialogue, but that's not the point. But it's really clunky, and a lot of stuff, too, that they repeat, including Dr. Connors has, like, this voice in his head. Sound familiar? Anyone who watched the first Spider-Man movie? Does that sound familiar? A lot of this feels very It's annoying because it's like it's the untold story, but it's like we're literally doing the same thing again. And it's like I could watch a better version of this movie just called Spider-Man. There's also so many plot lines in this movie that are just dropped. Like Peter just gives up his quest to find Uncle Ben's killer. Like he just gives up. It doesn't even explain I'm gonna give up. He doesn't even say that. It's just completely forgotten about. Also, Irfan Khan is in this movie as someone who's supposed to be watching Kirk Connors and his actions. But his character, all that's really known about him afterwards is like, oh yeah, he sees the lizard and is freaked out in the car, and that's the last we see of him. I guess there was a deleted scene where he was killed, but they didn't think of putting that in the movie to give us closure. What were the Sony executives thinking while making these movies? I really don't understand it. Also, the music choices in this movie are kind of odd. Like, there's a montage of Peter kind of skateboarding, kind of doing his own thing, and there's a Coldplay song playing. Not as dumb as the Philip Phillips song in the next movie, but still pretty funny to me. I don't know why. There's just a lot about this movie that just didn't work. It's just a very bland movie overall, and admittedly, I only bought the Blu-ray after No Way Home came out because what's sad is that these two movies are not good, but like, No Way Home actually did Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man justice, where I feel like they didn't really do it here. I feel like this movie and 2 were only made because Sony wanted to keep the rights to the characters so that way Marvel didn't do whatever they wanted with them. And so they made this movie. Since they were still owned by Sony, they recruited 2 Sony stars. Andrew Garfield was in The Social Network. Emma Stone was in Easy A. Both were Sony movies, as a Spider-Man. And they just made this movie. It's a movie that just feels like it was made just to be made rather than like there's anything interesting to say. Nothing about this movie is really that new. Nothing about this movie is really interesting. Nothing about this movie is coherent, even. Even my thoughts, admittedly, are not coherent, but again, neither is this movie. But Andrew Garfield is okay once he's Spider-Man. Like, he does have a few clips here and there, and he actually is kind of funny as Spider-Man. And Dennis Leary is at least okay in the role. Emma Stone's character development. What character development exactly? She has none. Like, her biggest character development moment comes at the very end, but that's still about Spider-Man. When her dad is killed and such, she doesn't react too much to him being dead. She's more upset about Peter not attending her father's funeral. Not upset over her father dying, but what? Come on. Also, I don't really like the way that Spider-Man is flying in this movie, which is kind of odd. Like, at least in the Sam Raimi movies, I felt like I was flying with Spider-Man. This movie, I felt like it was just missing that fun. This is a movie that took all the fun of the Sam Raimi movies and kind of just sucked it out completely. And just left us with this movie that is barely coherent. Not even barely, just completely incoherent. And with so much darkness that it just didn't need. This movie's a mess. It's not terrible by any means. I still think it's kind of watchable, but there are just so many things that keep me from saying, yeah, I'm going to go back and watch this movie again. I would rather watch Spider-Man 3 again. At least I felt that was satisfying, and at least I felt like it was a slightly more coherent than this movie was. I don't know why Sony kept thinking it was a good idea to just go into these Spider-Man movies and just be like, do all this stuff. Also, all the stuff with Peter's parents in this movie, yeah, there's nothing about Peter's parents in this movie that is actually satisfying. All we know is that his parents dropped him off at his uncle and aunt's house, and, oh, his parents were working on the secret project. That is mostly forgotten about in this movie as well. A lot of things in this movie were just completely forgotten about. So, yeah, this movie's a mess, and admittedly so are my thoughts, but you can clearly tell by watching this movie, and I will be talking about Amazing Spider-Man 2 in a couple weeks. That one's even worse somehow. I don't know why, but I don't know how, but I know how. So, Amazing Spider-Man, even though Andrew Garfield and Dennis Leary are at least passable in this movie, and there are some cool moments and some cool shots in this movie, almost nothing else in this movie works. It is too dark, both figuratively and literally. Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker, I didn't care for his version. The visuals are lacking. Peter is reckless throughout this entire movie. Annoyingly reckless. The villain, stupid. His plan, stupid. It just wastes so many characters, so many plot points. The dialogue is clunky at times. It doesn't really do anything that's new from the first movie. And also, I felt like it was just repeating things from the first movie. Even the music choices don't make sense. This is a movie that I felt like was just a mess and I kind of didn't realize it. I will give The Amazing Spider-Man, I was going to be a little nicer and say 2 out of 4, but because I'm ranting a little bit longer than I wanted to on this, I will give it 1.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. Not a bad movie by any means. I mean, it is bad, but like, it's not awful. It's not the worst Spider-Man movie I've seen. So that will be in a couple weeks. So what do you think about Amazing Spider-Man? How do you feel about the Amazing Spider-Man trilogy? Oh, wait, it wasn't a trilogy. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 duology, whatever. Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat, and stay safe.